Actually, not only are we going live, we are live. So, welcome, welcome, welcome to Intercultural Spark, that show where we talk to people who are doing amazing stuff in the world, like amazing, brilliant people that are building lives and supporting themselves and building businesses, doing really fascinating stuff. And we find out how they're doing it, what they're doing, and hopefully learn some of their secrets. So today's guest is Leslie Berliant. She is author, actor, dancer. I think it's like everything like in the creative arts. She does all these different things. She does professional writing. She's actually just amazing, has studied with the best, has published. And we are going to talk to her about the secret of finding your deep voice in writing. But also, you got to hear how she describes her life because she's just pulling it all together for this one amazing human being. So I am excited to have Leslie here today to find out her secrets and to have some fun times together. So welcome to Intercultural Spark. Hey, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me, Deanna. I love that little intro because I recognize some of those people.
Oh, right. Fantastic. Yeah, because Wendy Swart is in there, other brilliant entrepreneurs and people
Yeah.
pursuing mission-driven projects. And so what Leslie's talking about, and we'll talk about what you do. Leslie and I just met a couple weeks ago when I attended a week-long, like interactive, submersive, whatever you want to call it, writing workshop. And it was just incredible. It was just so much fun. And what's interesting, I want to know about you. Maybe we can just start there. The whole point of the workshop was how to find your deep voice by writing about your most humiliating moments in life.
Oh, when you say it, it sounds so wonderful. Um, that is actually probably a fairly somewhat accurate way of stating it. I would say it a little bit differently. It's really using your personal experiences, navigating the world as a human, and finding your authentic voice in how we tell the stories of our lives. And, like we talked about in that workshop, Deanna, you can choose how you want to express something. You can, make it funny, you can make it tragic, you can make it serious. There's all kinds of ways that we can tell and retell a story. And the key in how is not so much in the style in which you tell it, but it's finding the authenticity in the story that other people can connect to and share in your experience and then share in their own experience. I always say writing is sort of an interactive pursuit once you put it out in the world. You're no longer just the author of the story, but every single person who hears or reads that story is involved in that story.
Mhm. Well, so give us an example of, when you talk about that, I think there's a story you had about dating someone who,
Yeah.
can you tell us your dating story
So
in terms of
my
how that
most
gave
humiliating.
you
So I
fodder?
see we're going into my most humiliating stories, which is
Right.
great.
Well, you're the guest.
Um,
I really
so
want to shine the light on you.
thank you very much. So
My pleasure.
I'm a big so thankfully I'm no longer dating. It was not my sweet spot in any way, shape, or form. I'm married now, which is great, to somebody who I did not meet through dating. I actually met through writing,
Mhm.
and which is very apropos. But back when I was sort of a single mom, um, living in Los Angeles and out there on apps and trying to meet people in the wild and going on
Mhm.
dates, I would start to find myself having incredible anxiety
Mhm.
and sad about sort of the condition of my dating life. The date would go poorly and I'd feel totally dejected, and until a light bulb went on one day that I could actually use this stuff as material for my writing. And once that light bulb went on, I no longer was vested in a good outcome of the date. In fact, it almost was the opposite. where I was totally vested in once the date started going south, I wanted to see how far I could push it because I knew I could write that really
Mhm.
funny. And it's sort of the culminating experience of that was going out with a guy who, this was before sort of the twindler swindler kind of stuff, but who
Mm.
basically told me that he was a Italian heir, had this huge family foundation with all this. But no, did I believe it? Not really. But I was like, maybe. Well, when we finally met, it became very clear that he was homeless. And based on a number of things. And the pre sort of I'm going to use this as material me would have been upset, would have been anxious, would have
Like,
been,
how could I be this, like,
yeah,
low
how did
in
I
my
be this
life? Like, how did this happen to me?
exactly. But oh my God, I can really use this as material me was like, I am hanging in there, man. And it ended up being a very funny story. And he was lovely, fine human being, not who he said he was, but a fine human being. And the whole day actually ended up being quite enjoyable for me in this strange way, in the sense that I was just taking in the mental notes of what was going on so that I could then share it with the world
Mm. So
as
almost
one of
like you were
my
watching
humiliating.
the story, as I think you said you guys went to, like, and it was sounded like a lovely date. You went to a gallery opening, which had free wine and food.
Exactly. And then he wanted to go to
It
another.
was inventive for sure.
Super inventive. Really, like I said, a lovely person, obviously, really liked art. And, I think because, and there was another one sort of in that same time period
Mhm.
where it was a blind date. Somebody had set us up and where he just started going into excruciating detail about all the places his ex-wife had either thrown like food, wine, or jewelry at him. And honestly, again, the old me would have been like, this is terrible. And why did this person who set us up hate me so
Wait,
much?
do you know what? There was an entire Seinfeld episode about a guy who, do you remember this one? Where every time he broke up with someone, it was always so bad that people threw stuff at him. Like,
I
that
don't
actually,
remember that.
somebody, you told that story to someone and it became a Seinfeld episode for sure.
I'm sure that did once happen to me with something that ended up on Sex in the City. So it's all possible.
Really? Oh, come
Yes.
on. What was that? Oh, like, literally happened to you
It
and
was
ended
the
up on
guy
Sex in the
who
City.
kept asking people, like, after the second or third date to marry them. So, a
And
friend
point for clarity, this is not the person you're married to now, correct?
no, and a friend of my cousin's was a writer on the show
Mm.
and also knew this guy who I dated because 'cause they'd all gone to college together, and it just ended up as, like, this very funny
Oh my god, that's so
thing.
funny. Ended up on Sex in the City.
Yes.
Alright, so because a lot of people who watch the show are business people, what I found really impressive when you and I talked is, I don't know if this is more true for women or maybe people in the creative arts, but in the weekend that you and I worked together, you were the instructor for the piece, but then you would share these things, like you were working on a political campaign or like you'd been, I don't know, a choreographer. There had been
Mhm.
all these different things that you did. I'm accustomed to US American society where people look at that and go, "Oh, she can't make it as." I
Yeah,
put myself in that mold of
right.
corporate culture and I wish I could get out, but it's like people are like, "Oh, she just can't decide." And
Yeah.
I said to you, Leslie, what's the thread that pulls it all together? Because that's your sort of business voice. What is it? Because you articulated it so clearly. What's like the elevator pitch of you?
Yeah, it's a great question. The elevator pitch is really I feel like my whole career has really sort of revolved around people's ability to communicate in an
Mhm.
authentic way and to move people, right? So whether you're writing a story in the Jewish Journal or you are a candidate trying to gain votes or you are writing a short film, you're the through line is that you want to move people. You want to move people to feel something. You want to move people to do something. We always say in politics, people won't necessarily remember what you said, but they'll remember how they felt when you said it. And people vote for people who make them feel something. And it's true in writing, it's true in dance, it's true in music. The things that stick are the things that make you feel. And that for me has really been the through line. Whatever I've been doing in my career, which has been varied, um, I feel like that mission of making people feel something and
So would you say
respond
your
to that.
mission then is like cultivating the story? Is that like the thing that you do wherever you
I
are?
almost feel like particularly I would say, in writing, when I work with people, I'm almost like the writing whisperer, right? So I have this ability that I've cultivated over time to actively listen in
Mhm.
order to be able to pull out what somebody is trying to get at and get them to the core of the story. It's true in politics too, that so much of what you're doing is around communication. And so, I work with people almost as like a candidate whisperer, right, to help them evolve and bring their message forward.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, go ahead.
Well, so actually the piece I told it's so funny, I was late to my own show today because I was writing a piece on vulnerability versus social norm violations. Because I was gonna write this article last week and I was using Will Smith as the example because he was being so vulnerable about like his mom and how he felt with the abuse and childhood trauma. And then he like walked up on stage and slapped, and that was vulnerability. It was very powerful. Then he slapped Chris Rock on the Oscars, and that was
Right.
like a social norm violation,
Just
right? So
a little bit.
I mean, that's an extreme, but some of what you do is get people to go to that pick those moments that are humiliating. I mean, that's how she started our writing weekend, which I spent Saturday in the bathroom crying, and then by Sunday it was brilliant. But how do you find that balance though in terms of choosing what to share? Because vulnerability,
Yeah.
I feel like US culture, especially corporate culture, they see vulnerability, they're gonna jump on it. So how do you
Yeah.
find that balance on what to share so that it makes the point that you want to make and not just
Yeah.
being like, "Wah."
I mean, that's a really interesting question, like the comparison between creative work and the business world, which, I've sort of worked in both.
Ah,
You know, I I often think in the business world, we so let's take that one first because I think in your personal work, it's almost easier to share vulnerability because when you can turn it into art, sort of changes your relationship to it, which is why I start with things that people want to let go of. Because I have found, and I'm not a therapist, but I found in my own life and in the lives of the people I work with, that just by writing something and bringing creativity to it, you change your
mhm.
relationship to that event
Yes.
or that thing.
Yeah.
In the business world, I think there are similar principles on authenticity. I mean, just thinking about this, today is both Trans Awareness Day and Cesar Chavez Day, right? So cue the performative corporate, tweets about supporting people or, Cesar Chavez was a hero without actually doing anything to back that up. And people read through
Right.
that, right? You
Well,
see.
and that happens all the time with all the month celebrations and yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
This sort of
Mhm, mhm,
performative, workshopped response to something, as opposed to a company like take Penzeys Spices that is
mhm,
very out front with who they are and what they believe. They're very good at integrating story into what they do and explaining why they hold the values they hold based on who they are, who their customers are, and who their vendors are.
mhm,
And, I think in the corporate world, obviously, and in the celebrity world and in the political world, there is a degree of cautiousness around absolute honesty.
mhm.
But I look at somebody like John Fetterman in Pennsylvania, who I don't know, he's running for Senate. I don't know if your viewers follow him, but he's a pretty open guy about who he is, what his past has been, some of his struggles, and in no way does that diminish. In
What
fact,
would
I
be an
would
example
say,
of though? Is there something that he might have been afraid to share? Like, is there something that you
yeah, I mean, I'm
Yeah.
trying to think. I think that he's talked about sort of his rough upbringing.
Mhm,
Um, you know, he's somebody who presents, a little bit gruff, but he's incredibly smart. He doesn't shy away from sort of an openness about that. And I think that that is what has made him a front runner in that race, as
mhm,
opposed to taken away from. And again, we know when somebody is not being authentic. And I often tell candidates there isn't
mhm.
a political you and a you. There's just you,
Mhm. Well,
right? There
especially
isn't,
in the world of social media and online media, like anyone who thinks that they can have different personalities in different platforms is completely wrong.
it
You
doesn't
know, it
work.
just doesn't work that way. No, it does
Yeah, and
not.
people see through it.
Mhm,
Like, I'll often tell a
mhm,
political candidate who's shy or nervous, tell the audience right from the get-go, "I'm a really shy
mhm,
person, and I never thought I'd be the one running for this office, but here I am." The
mhm.
minute you tell people that, they are on your side.
Well,
But
because
if you
otherwise
try
it can come ac yeah. So I was to say it can come across as the people know you're holding something back, and I think people may put something in worse than what you're actually holding back, which is just that you're shy, you know?
right, and then people
Mhm,
start to feel uncomfortable, right? And they don't
mhm,
know why. Whereas once you tell them, like I once had a candidate get on a stage in front of 1,000 people and say, "This is the I'm so nervous, the biggest audience I've ever been in front of." And people were out of their seats cheering
mhm,
because they'd never had a candidate just be that open with them. So
mhm,
I think that vulnerability is actually a kind of superpower.
mhm.
And yeah,
So I was just going to say, and then I'm going to share some images of the workshops you do. What I'm realizing is, so what you're saying, like to find your voice in business, you're talking about that through, what's that through fare that goes through? So for you, like it's storytelling, which literally in writing with candidates and things like that. But one thing I would say in terms of telling stories, what was so much fun, and this is not a commercial for Leslie's workshop, although it was fabulous. I recommend everyone does it, is that we were asked to write. I keep going back to this. Clearly, it was traumatizing because I hadn't written about this stuff, about our humiliating moments. Um, but we wrote about them first from our own perspective when that was the part that was like, but then you were like, write about it from the other person's perspective. Write about it from the chair in the room. You know, it was writing about it from these different perspectives, and it just tipped everything
yeah,
on end. And the one I will share, I'm not going to share the worst ones, but I will share that I've shared I've had a narrative in my mind since I was 10 when Brad Simon threw me down the hill at Craig School, and it's just always been like, "It was just awful." And so I rewrote it. It was to me, it was my most traumatizing moment. I rewrote it from 2 different perspectives after mine. One was from Brad's perspective, and I realized that I think he was being bullied into doing it, and I unlocked this memory that I think he apologized and helped me up, which I'd never even known. But I think the funniest is I wrote it from the perspective of my red shorts with the stars and moons because that was traumatizing. Everyone saw my shorts. But when I wrote about it from the shorts perspective, that's why you put shorts on under your dress so that no one would see your underwear. So they were actually just doing their job. So
right, right, right. I mean,
sorry
that's
that
the
was too
thing.
much and you're my guest, but it was just it
It
was so
takes away the
freeing to do
power,
that.
right? It takes away the power that these things hold over
Yes.
you. Plus, you do get insight. And,
Mhm,
you know, I, I think in corporate communications, listen, there are certainly lines. I recently had an
mhm,
experience um, with a social worker in a hospital. I'm trying to help my mother who had a terrible accident,
mhm.
and a lot of frustration with the insurance and the social worker in the hospital coming in to tell us how hard her day had been while my mother can't walk.
Oh, boy.
And
Yeah.
to me
Sure.
that's like, okay, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about that kind of sort of centering oneself.
Mhm,
But when we bring forward our truth, our vulnerability, our authenticity. It's permission for other people to do the same. And in the corporate world, we know we're being sort of snowed a lot of the time, and it is very refreshing when a company is authentic and real, and you get a glimpse of the people sort of behind it. And I think there's a lot more space for that, especially among entrepreneurs. I believe in the entrepreneur world for a long time there was this idea we have to always say how well we're doing, right?
Mhm.
How easy it's been for us.
Yeah.
You can be just like me and make six figures every month, blah blah blah. You know what? Most of those people aren't doing what they say they're doing. I know a lot of those people and they aren't doing what they say they're doing. They're putting on airs. But when you have somebody who's like, "Listen, this is hard and this is
Mhm.
what I've done to get through those difficult times. And this is how I keep going. And this is how things grow in a real way." It's so comforting and refreshing. And those are the people I want to work with. I want to work with the
Mhm.
people who are real.
Yeah. I also think what you just said, though, this whole idea that as a business owner, you're supposed to be this certain size or anything. I've really been on this trip of the whole idea of micro entrepreneurs, which is smaller businesses. Many look at micro entrepreneurs as just because we're not asking for loans from the government.
Right.
We're often just local clients. Um, but here's the thing, making a living, supporting families, hiring people within the community, like micro entrepreneurs are amazing, and most people are like, it's just too small in favor of big businesses who are often fake and mean. So
Right, and also not, I mean, my experience as an entrepreneur and
mhm,
much of the stuff I do is that the money that I spend goes right into the community, right? So, for
mhm,
example, on these retreats, food plays a role, right? I try and make it a very nurturing environment. Well, I'm buying all local, right?
mhm.
From my local
Yeah,
farmers, local markets, because I want to micro entrepreneurs and small businesses, they are the engine that
I think so.
drives
Yep.
communities.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Mhm. And I think it's great, and that's a good transition for our, let's do it, our flash photo stories. Because what's important is when we talk about being a writer, people are like, "Great, you're a writer." Like, Kurt Vonnegut, her teacher was Kurt Vonnegut, and his big advice was, "Well, if you're writing, you're a writer," you know? Um, but, what you're talking about and claiming yourself as an entrepreneur, which is fabulous, is the idea of, yeah, you're a writer, that's what you do, but you are an entrepreneur. So, I'd love to look at, so for the flash photo stories, you've sent me some photos in advance.
Yeah,
I'm going to flash them on the screen, and speaking of telling stories, tell me like a 1 to 2 sentence story about each.
sure. So here we are on a week-long retreat that I led in the Loire Valley in France. And it was a costume festival at one of the chateaus, and I took the group there, and as you can see, I think one or two people are actually dressed in costume, and watched were part of the festival, and then found a quiet space to sit down and write, and it
That's
was
amazing.
lovely, lovely day, lovely week.
Mhm. What I love about that too is, to have a business, you just need to create a product that someone will buy from you. And the fact that you're
Yeah.
like, and we're in the Loire Valley at a
Well, and
chateau. I
honestly,
mean, you
let me
created
tell you
it.
a little quick thing about that, though. So
Mhm,
I did it 2 years.
mhm.
I did it 1 year, and then I skipped a year, and then I did it again. The first year, I had 1 participant, 1, and I still
Wow.
did it. She was game, and I
Mhm.
really wanted to show I could do it.
Wow.
And I had 1 participant, and a normal person would have been like, "Don't do it." But
Right?
I thought, "This will get me." I just felt in my core, this is where I start. And by the
Wow.
next time I did it, the retreat was full. This isn't even
Mhm.
all the participants here, right? The
Wow.
retreat was full. I had to get a bigger space. It was a much bigger deal. And, it's just sometimes you have to start where you're at.
Oh, start where you are. That's an absolutely wonderful phrase because you're right. And oftentimes, speaking of, oh my God, is this like the 50th time I'm talking about humiliating moments? Sorry. Clearly, you traumatized me, Leslie.
I know, I'm worried.
Um, but I mean, there's so much research and things like that say you learn from your failures. You like the moment either you learn
100%.
from your failures or from your risk. That moment that you're uncomfortable is often the moment that you're growing. So that's
And
amazing that you did that.
and I would say as a writer, other people also can learn from your failures and your risks and the things that we carry shame
Oh, if you're
about.
willing to write
I
about
really
it.
feel
Mhm.
like shame is very much a,
Mm,
unhelpful emotion,
yeah,
and anything we can do to rid ourselves of shame, and shame grows in secrecy, right?
right. Yeah.
Shame grows in, like, the places that we refuse to share because it just feels like too much,
Mhm,
and once you let it out, it takes away its power and it starts to dissolve the
mhm.
shame around it.
I mean, in some ways, as a business owner, though, like if you choose to take that path of authenticity and sharing, you're also building your own network. And I do still, and sorry, I'm saying almost the opposite of you are. I do still think there's people who will judge you and be like, yeah, I'm not gonna be with that person. But I guess if you're a business owner and you're building your business, you're building it with
Yeah.
the people who will love
I
you
mean,
and work with you.
definitely, and here's the thing, most of the people who signed up for my second retreat knew
Mhm,
what I had done in the first one. Like, they
mhm,
knew I was just one person. These were
mhm,
people a lot of people I knew that I was in a community with, in a women's
mhm,
community with. So, it wasn't like I hid that. In fact, I was
mhm.
extremely open.
Well, and I'm
Um
jealous of the one person. Actually, I'm jealous of the one person. I'm not judging you. I'm jealous of her because 'cause I'm like, "So she got you, like, one-on-one writing coaching for for a week? That's
Yeah, and
incredible."
she had such a great experience that she later invited me to come and spend a weekend with her in her beach house, and,
Mhm.
you know,
Well, and
sh
people loving you is how you get other stuff because then other people are like, "Oh, you have to do this." Like, Leslie, just by
yeah,
the way, if you've got friends that wanna do a writing retreat, have retreat, Leslie will travel, and you
exactly.
talked about and then I wanna go back to your photos, this whole idea of food, though, and the idea of how writing nourishes you. So, Leslie, she cooks for you the whole weekend. Like, it literally nourishes you so that you can focus on your creativity. That whole concept is really interesting as
You
well.
know, I think about when we the retreat that you were at, the weekend
Mhm.
retreat, and when I mentioned why the food is part of it and the nurturing and the taking care of. And I work with women writers, so
Mhm,
taking care of women so that they can just be writers.
mhm.
One of the participants started to cry at that because she realized how long it had been since somebody had nurtured her. She's
Yeah,
the nurturer.
mm,
And I think it's so important to be in an environment when we do the week-long retreats, it's like, the food is really, like,
yeah,
amazing, and it's
that's part
every
of it.
meal, and we go out and do a lot of stuff, but it is all about nurturing and nourishing because we don't get a lot of that as
Yeah.
women in our lives.
I did like, though, too, that it was alcohol free because if you wanna really get deep into what you're feeling, you
Yeah,
kind of have to, like, let go of, like, pushing it down with alcohol or
exactly.
substance or stuff like that. Alright, tell me more. Let's look at these photos
So
'cause this is
so
Evie.
this is a photo from the weekend retreat that Deanna was part of, so
Yeah.
you can see the big smile on her face, so despite what Deanna's telling you about the trauma, there's also much joy and
Oh, it
laughter.
was fabulous, don't get me wrong, it was fabulous. It really
So,
was. I
that's
was transformed, but pretty
this is
funny.
someone I've worked with for many years, and she's a
Yeah.
great writer. This is us, doing an exercise. So a lot of the dinners involve some very fun writing exercises, and the meals, are kind of doing stuff with writing, but very, uh, easy and loose, and, this is us doing one of those
Mm. That
exercises.
was like one of those those exquisite corpse things from the surrealists where you get
Exactly.
creativity in spite of yourself, like by,
Yeah, you don't have to
collaborating on
be.
things.
That is one of the things that's really
Mhm.
important to me in these workshops. You don't have to come with something written. You don't have to know what you're gonna write
That
about. You
was
just have to have
different.
the desire to write.
Yep. Nobody had to prove themselves, so you didn't actually already have to have written something, and the other thing too was you weren't allowed the other rule that was fabulous, you weren't allowed to say, like, "Well, this isn't that good." You weren't allowed to preface your reading by, being self-deprecating, and that was
Exactly.
also really good.
And
Alright, is
that's
this one?
partly
Oh, so
partly That is because our editing brain and our creative brain are very different.
Mhm.
And the minute we turn on our editing brain, it's very hard to be creative. And so I really encourage people to keep those separate. So here we are back in France at a restaurant that I've been going to for many, many years that started out as an outdoor sort of tables at a goat farm and has turned into a very fine dining experience. And when we were in France, I took the group there, and we had dinner. And Beatrice, who is the owner, who I've known for many years, just gave us the five-star treatment. It was lovely and wonderful.
That is wonderful. Well, so that's a taste of what you do. So the last thing that we're going to do is we've got the flash exercise. And actually this one, so I'm also a group fitness instructor. So I work in marketing, but also teach group fitness. And so I always do an exercise or something each week that you can do at your desk. This one feels not as interpretive. Usually it's very interpretive. Oh my God, I'm already doing my self-deprecating. I'm not allowed to
Yep,
say that. All
there
right.
you
I'm
go.
just going to make myself full screen and show you my exercise, and then you'll do it with me, and then you get to guess why I chose that exercise for this. So this is really easy. You can just do it sitting literally at your desk. Put your hands straight out and then bring it down, and then actually press your hand back. Oh, and press back like that. So, it's a stretch. Yep. Go ahead and do it with me. Let's put you
Yeah,
back. All
okay.
right.
Mm,
Oh, all right. So why did I choose this particular stretch for you?
because your hands need to be nimble for you to write, and your wrists.
Absolutely. Yes, that's exactly it. That's why I said slow. The other thing I would say though is when you go like this, like you have the ability with writing, because we started like this, you have the ability with your writing to really make an imprint on other people. So that
I
was
love
my
that.
my that's my interpretive part of it, your imprint with your writing. And
I
Leslie, any
love
other
that.
words of advice for people? I feel like at this stage of life, like the advice of don't hold back because what do you have to lose? I mean, what's your thought on that? What's your departing advice for
My
writers or
departing
people?
yeah, it's don't wait. You know,
Mhm.
I spent a lot of my life waiting to do the thing or deciding it was too late to do the thing, right? Either waiting or deciding it was too late. I'd already missed the boat on the thing. Neither one of those is true, right? Don't wait and don't don't tell yourself it's too late. It's never too late. If you're still breathing, it is not too late. And if you still feel a pull to something, don't wait.
Mhm.
You know, if you feel the pull to write, to dance, I work with a writer who started ballroom dancing in her 70s and performing. You know, don't wait.
Yeah. My client Jerry Witkowski, we actually have a book coming out in June, but his advice is he just turned 94 on Tuesday, and he
Oh,
always says, "Don't die
wonderful.
until you're dead."
Yeah, thank you. That is a much better way of saying it, Jerry.
You are welcome. Well, thank you so much, Leslie. This was just so much fun. I just adore you. And as much as I know I said it, I
Back
thought it was
at you, Deanna.
fabulous. I'm not even going to say it was awful. It was actually fabulous. And the ability to write and look at things through different perspectives and your approach that was so loving and caring and nurturing and encouraging to do this really was transformational. So thank you for all the
Thank
work
you.
that you do. Absolutely wonderful.
Thank
And
you, Deanna.
my pleasure. Thank you so much. And we'll see everyone next Thursday on Intercultural Spark.